Information reaching our news desk suggests that employees of the St. Lucia Postal Service have been advised to return to work while the union negotiates on their behalf. The postal workers, who are represented by the St. Lucia Civil Service Association, had downed their tools last Thursday after a new postmaster general was installed, allegedly without affording any of the staff the opportunity for advancement. Sources close to the conflict suggest that one employee in particular had been acting in the capacities of Postmaster General, Human Resource Manager, and Deputy Postmaster for a period of 7 months. Yet, when it came time to fill the Postmaster General position, she was purportedly denied the opportunity to apply. In solidarity, her fellow staff members staged protest action, refusing to work unless the matter was addressed. A letter to the Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of Finance, Francis Fontenelle, was penned by the CSA on April 5, 2024. The correspondence outlined the employees' grievances and requested clarification on behalf of its members. It remains to be seen what steps will be taken by the Public Service Commission to rectify the situation. Reporting for the GVD TV News, I am Eldris Charles.
Leader of the opposition, Honorable Alan Chasney, has been invited to participate in the 2024 Global Parliamentary Forum, GPF, jointly organized with the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund, IMF, which will be taking place in person in Washington, D.C. from the 15th to the 16th of April 2024, ahead of the 2024 Spring Meetings, SMS. The leader of the opposition will be out of state from the 14th to the 20th of April 2024. Once again, Housing Minister Richard Frederick has found himself in hot water for a statement made on his Thursday night talk show, Can I Help You? This time for derogatory comments aimed at former government minister Fortuna Belrose and a scathing attack on a longtime vendor, Ursula Fannis. The women's arm of the United Workers' Party has taken umbrage at these remarks by the minister and has released a statement condemning his actions.
Power. The women's arm of the United Workers' Party unequivocally condemns the continued reprehensible and misogynistic behavior exhibited by Government Minister Richard Frederick in the office of the Prime Minister. His repeated use of derogatory and demeaning language on his talk show, Can I Help You, with Richard Frederick, is a blatant affront to the dignity of women and an egregious abuse of his platform and power. Minister Frederick targeted former government minister Fortuna Belrose, making derogatory comments about her lack of hair, a deeply personal attribute that should never be subjected to ridicule. Such language is not only offensive, but also reinforces damaging stereotypes and devalues the significant contributions of women in our society. In another deplorable act, Richard Frederick, the minister responsible for vendor affairs, used his show to once again bully and attack a known longtime vendor, Ursula Fannis, also known as Joycelyn Fannis. Rather than addressing her concerns through proper official channels, he chose to humiliate her publicly, divulging sensitive and confidential information about her financial obligations in a most unethical manner. The women's arm of the United Workers' Party supports the principles of decency and the enshrined rights of equality and justice. We stand in solidarity with Miss Belrose, Miss Fannis, and all the other women who have been subjected to such vile attacks. We demand that Minister Frederick resign from his ministerial post immediately in order to prevent further occurrences of the abusive behavior. His actions cannot be overlooked or dismissed as merely controversial. They are harmful and perpetuate misogyny. As advocates for the rights and empowerment of women, the Women's Arm is resolute in its pursuit of a society where every individual is respected and valued equally. We urge all members of the community and relevant authorities to stand with us in condemning these actions and to work to eradicate this type of abuse from our public office. Thank you.
The disclosure that the total cost of the St. Jude Hospital rehabilitation project stands at 265 million EC dollars has sparked concern among many, including the members of the opposition. In a recently held discussion, Deputy Leader of the UWP and former Economic Development Minister Guy Joseph speculated as to how the figures were ascertained. Joseph also called on the Prime Minister to offer an explanation to the populace. We have the details in this report.
During his budget presentation, Prime Minister Honorable Philip J. Pierre listed the completion cost of St. Jude's Hospital as 265 million EC dollars. This figure has baffled many who recalled previous pronouncements made by the SLP administration on this contentious subject. Among those raising questions is Deputy Leader of the UWP, Guy Joseph. During a recent discussion on the budget, Joseph called on the Prime Minister to explain the basis of the exorbitant costs. The reconstruction of St. Jude's Hospital has been a hot-button issue for many years, with successive governments making failed attempts to deliver the much-needed medical facility. The former Kenny Anthony administration commenced the rehabilitation of the original structure, yet failed to complete the project. During his tenure, opposition leader Alan Chasney chose to construct a modern facility despite heavy criticisms from the then opposition. At this time, it was deemed that refurbishing the original structure would have been quicker and more cost-effective, a course of action pursued by the current administration. Hence the raised eyebrows at the $265 million project price tag.
Prime Minister owes the country an explanation about the real cost of St. Jude, because this is the same government that said $5 million, and John Peters said it, $5 to $20 million, and he was part of the team. The member for Labrie said some chemical and some paint, and that's what St. Jude needed. Let's say that would cost $1 million.
While there has been no announcement that any contracts were signed in relation to St. Jude's Hospital, it is common knowledge that remedial works had commenced on the building. In this vein, Joseph speculated as to whether the cost of these works factored into the price quoted by Prime Minister Pierre.
So is the true cost of completing St. Jude now $265 million? And if the borrowing from the Saudis was only 205 million and a portion of it is to go to the stadium, then is it a situation where Renault has done maybe a $65 million worth of work at the stadium that he is to be paid for?
So for GVD TV News, this is Sharice Chedi reporting.
The Debt and Investment Unit in the Department of Finance announced the enactment of the new Public Debt Management Act 2023. The commencement of the Public Debt Management Act represents a significant step forward to ensure sound fiscal management and sustainable economic growth. This landmark legislation reaffirms the government's commitment to responsible debt management practices and will contribute to the overall resilience of St. Lucia's economy. More in this report from Glenn Simon.
The government of St. Lucia has announced the enactment of the new Public Debt Management Act 2023, which took effect on April 1st, 2024. Deputy Director of Finance with responsibility for debt and investment in the Department of Finance, Vera John Emmanuel, pointed out that this landmark legislation consolidates and modernizes laws to strengthen the management of public debt, ensure prudent borrowing practices and sustainable fiscal management. The new act replaces the National Savings and Development Bond Act and the Treasury Bill Act.
So no longer we will be raising our bonds through Parliament utilizing those two pieces of legislation, particularly the NSDB Act. This legislation also brings forth to instill greater transparency and accountability as it pertains to public debt management. It requires government to report to Parliament in terms of the medium-term debt strategy, also providing audiences with what the approved borrowings was and how did the debt management unit went on to contract those debts, the terms and so forth. So much greater transparency will be coming into the Parliament through that piece of legislation.
Emmanuel noted that the legislation also calls for the establishment of a Public Debt Management Advisory Committee.
That committee will be reviewing all borrowings and advising the Minister of Finance and the Cabinet on the way forward in terms of the borrowings.
The mandate of the Debt and Investment Unit is to provide funding for the budget through loans, bonds, and treasury bills.
So when you go through that piece of legislation, it will tell you about raising government funds at a minimum cost subject to a prudent degree of risk. Though we took some parts from the past legislation to incorporate in this one, this piece of legislation is added much more features. It has coverage, more coverage like overdrafts and payables was not part of government debt stock before. Right now, with this piece of legislation, we will be including the payables in the government debt stock.
The key provisions of the Public Debt Management Act include transparency and accountability, debt sustainability, risk management, effective debt management practices, and a strengthened institutional framework. The Debt and Investment Unit encourages stakeholders and the public to peruse the legislation, which can be found on the websites of the Government of St. Lucia, the Ministry of Finance, and the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank's website. For the National Competitiveness and Productivity Council, Glenn Simon reporting.
We've come to the end of the GVD TV 10 a.m. news update. Join us at 2 p.m. for a sneak peek at what's coming up in the GVD TV evening news at 7 p.m. Join us then.